My name is Dick Taylor, and I'm here representing Congressman Kevin McCarthy's office. And today I'm interviewing Jessica Brown on Thursday, August 3rd, 2017, and we're here at Bakersfield College in Bakersfield, California. And also present with us today is John Farron, who is operating our camera. This interview is being conducted for the Veterans History Project for the Library of Congress. So with that, we'll get started. So Jessica, we've talked before, so tell me a little bit about yourself before your childhood growing up. What you did, where you lived.
Mm-hmm. Well, I was born in Bakersfield, California. Grew up in Buttonwillow, California. Had a great childhood. My mom and dad divorced, but my grandparents pretty much took over and helped my mom raise me. I was small town feeling, so everyone knew everybody. It was a good childhood. Then I went to Shafter High School because everyone who grows up in Buttonwillow goes to Shafter. And so went to Shafter. Had a bit of a rough start, I would say. A lot of insecurities I was dealing with myself as, just a teenager. I had an eating disorder, and then after that, I was admitted to UCLA for some treatments. Recovered from that, and then I did a junior miss when I was at Shafter. I was able to still play, 2 seasons of soccer and softball. So I was pretty. After that, I kind of got real active and did a lot of good things. Then after that, after I graduated Shafter High School, I went to Cal State Bakersfield thinking I wanted to go into nursing. And it turned out I was like, I don't think I want to go that route. So then I started studies in criminal justice. So did that, and then ended up moving out on my own at about 18. So I got a full-time job at Starbucks, and I was working there full-time and living on my own. And then after that, I stopped going to Cal State and started doing some online studies instead. Just, gave me a little more time to get some more hours. And then after Starbucks ended, I worked at Kay Jewelers for 4 years. And then during the end of Starbucks, though, I met my boyfriend, who I was with for about 4 years, and it was a really unhealthy, abusive relationship. So when finally I had the last straw, I was probably, I think, like 22, around there. And I was just going through a lot of vulnerability, a lot of insecurities again. So I've always had a passion to join the military. Both of my grandfathers, my dad, have all joined the military. No female in our family has ever, and so that passion in me has always been there. I guess just the drive to do it, and I finally found the motivation and the drive to serve my country and to join at age 23.
So after you served exemplary service as a general at Shafter, right. Shafter as a general.
Yeah.
That's a neat little school, and played soccer and did some other stuff, and then you worked at Starbucks, you said, and and Starbucks has got some kind of cool. I've heard they've got some cool benefits and stuff like that.
Yeah.
So, what different locations did you work at Starbucks?
I worked at the one in Buttonwillow off the 5. I worked there for actually about 3 years, and then I went to the Marketplace, and I worked there for about 1.5 years, and that's when I met the manager from Kay Jewelers, and he offered me a position there. So.
And then you worked there for 2 years, and then this isn't about me, but both my wife and daughter work for Starbucks.
Oh, okay.
And they both started out in Buttonwillow.
Oh, nice.
And then worked at the Olive Drive in Valley Plaza and down on 24th Street. But so you said you had some members of your family that served in the military during kind of what eras?
Well, both of my grandfathers were during World War II in Korea. My mother's dad, he served in the Army, and my father's dad was Marine Corps. And then my father served He served during peacetime, but he was in the Air Force. He was an air traffic controller.
So, and
he
you touched on this a little bit about your desire to kind of serve your country, and you're like 22 and kind of looking at kind of doing something different.
Yeah.
So, what did your family think about that?
Well, actually, my family, the only one who knew I was going to enlist was my grandfather, my mom's dad. He was the only one who, at the time, I could really just trust to motivate me and to not like make me change my mind. Because my grandmother, she would have been like, no way. You know, everybody else would have been no. And so I knew he would give me that push I needed. And so he was actually the only one who knew the day before I was leaving to boot camp. Then I told everybody.
Wow.
I was just like, I'm leaving tomorrow. Sorry.
So speaking of boot camp, so where did you go to boot camp?
I went to Great Lakes in
Okay.
Chicago. Yeah.
And so up in Illinois, so
Yeah,
what time of
Illinois.
the year was that?
That was in July 2011.
So for those that don't know,
It's-
you served in the Navy.
Yes.
That's where Great Lakes recruit training is.
Yeah.
So you went to Great Lakes, it was July, kind of weather was like,
Pretty humid. Yeah.
Okay. And then had you been away from home before?
No, I've always been pretty independent. I mean, when I moved out, my mom still lived in Buttonwillow, and so I moved to Bakersfield on my own. So I've always, never had a problem as far as like homesickness. I've always liked to kind of get away or do things on my own. So.
And so you got through boot camp, and then at some point in time, you tested either with the prior to the military, you tested with ASVAB and figured out what your MOS was going to be, and what direction did that take you then?
So that took me to be an aviation boatswain handler. So as an ABH, you work on the flight deck or in the hangar bay.
Okay.
And so after Great Lakes, they sent me to Pensacola, Florida for A school. So I can get some firefighting training. Just pretty much it's all training based on my rate and my job.
And so the training tank, for those that don't know this, I know it, but some don't. That's no cakewalk because they have a fire coming out of things, and you have to practice going into the flames. And were you okay with that?
Yeah, I mean, I was pretty little, and so compared to the guys, it was a little more challenging. But I was really okay with that. I it was crazy because I didn't have that fear that I thought, or I just didn't think about it, especially when you're in the moment, you just go for it.
And then so now you're down at Pensacola and going through school. So about what year is this?
This is still about 2000, I want to say November of 2011.
Okay.
Yeah, around there.
So you were, let's see, about how old were you when September 11th came along? Were you like?
I was about 14.
Okay.
Oh, I'm 30 now, so yeah, about 14.
Okay.
was
So
a
you were in high
freshman.
school?
Mhm.
Okay.
Yeah.
Out of Shafter.
Out of Shafter, yeah.
And so now now you're down in Florida. After your school, then what?
Then they assigned everyone to their station or their duty station, and there were some for Japan, there were some for San Diego, and so I chose San Diego, and I got onto the USS Carl Vinson, and did my rest of my term there.
And so, for those that don't know, you and I know, but for the Carl Vinson, what kind of ship is the Carl Vinson?
It's an aircraft carrier.
Okay, nuclear powered aircraft carrier,
Yes.
and your job would entail you being out at sea, doing work on the flight deck and on the hangar bay, as you said.
Mm-hmm.
So, okay, so you got orders for that, and
Right.
that was out of San Diego.
Mm-hmm.
And so then, what would what'd you think about the ship? I mean, how'd you adjust?
Oh,
to
it was
ship?
it was definitely an adjustment. Ship life is really different. I mean, our bunks are almost like coffins, so you can't really be claustrophobic.
Right. So tell
tight
people.
spaces.
Yeah, go ahead.
Oh no, it's just tight spaces. The stairwell isn't your typical stairs. They're real steep. Because everyone's used to going up and down them. Everyone's always at a fast pace. So it was definitely challenging, and just you kind of have to have, if you are claustrophobic, which I thought I was, but then when I was able to live the ship life, you just really don't think about it, and because you're so focused on what you're doing and your mission. And
so for those that don't know, I served on board a ship when I was in the Marine Corps.
Oh, nice.
But so a lot of people don't know like the daily routine. So tell us a little bit about your daily routine, like when you got up, and was it like regular daylight hours, or was it nighttime that you worked, and what did you do?
Well, it varied. We worked anywhere from 16 to 20 hours a day, and so our missions were really intense, especially the first deployment was a 6-month. That one was a little bit more rough. That was from 2011 to 12. And that one, daily routine would be to be up on the flight deck by 05, and then we did muster and pretty much went over of what the day was going to consist, and then we started our day around, I'd say, 6 o'clock and started flight ops, and then we weren't done with flight ops until we got the last aircraft in, which could be anywhere from midnight or even 1 in the morning. Now, if you were a night check, it was usually a 12-hour, 12 on, 12 off. But I worked during the day, and my day would consist of muster, and then after muster, I'd go onto the flight deck and begin flight ops. I worked on the bow, which is the very front of the ship. So I worked on that portion because the way we divided the flight deck was into 3 portions. You had the bow, which is the front. Then you had Flight 2, which was the middle of the ship, and then you had Flight 3, which was the aft of the ship. And so I worked the bow, and pretty much my job consisted of working catapults 1 and 2, and the catapults are what launches the aircraft. And so what I did is I directed each aircraft onto the catapult, and then I gave the sign for it was safe to launch and hook up. And so I was signaling all the hookups and giving the safety signs, for when it was clear, no one was in the way, the launch bar was hooked up correctly, there should be no issues, and they launched the aircraft. And then we also were in charge of recovering the aircraft, and the aircraft would recover right and back aft. They'd hook up to the wires, their resting gear. The resting gear would slow.
For those that don't know, when you say they hook up to the wires, so they're landing.
They're landing.
Coming and landing. Okay.
Yes. So they're landing, and their launch bar drop, or their tail hook drops, catches one of the wires. And the wire slows the aircraft down.
And for those that don't know, when you say a wire, how big of a wire is it? It's not like a wire in our house, but it's
if these things snap, they'll literally take your leg off.
And they're probably like an inch or 2 in diameter?
Oh, yeah.
Okay.
Definitely. And so these wires would catch it, slow it down, and then we'd bring it in between Fly 1 and Fly 2. And normally they parked it up on the bow, because in the bow area, believe it or not, we could fit the most aircraft, and we would fit we could fit up to about 18 aircraft up there, which is pretty, like, you think these aircraft are big. We had F-18s, we had, which we called babies and rhinos, because there's the bigger F-18s, and then you got the smaller ones, and then you had prowlers, and we had growlers. So we had all kinds of different aircraft, different sizes, so we'd direct and park them as fitted. And then, and so those were pretty much my daily duties. It all depended on what our chief, which is an E7, it all depended on what calls they were going to make when these aircraft landed. So as far as where they'd go, and we just had to be there and be ready. So.
And if you watch TV or documentaries, there's people on the flight deck that are wearing different colored shirts, and that mean things. So what kind of shirt or best color shirt did you wear?
I was a yellow shirt. So to become a yellow shirt, you start off as a blue shirt. You go through chalking, chaining. Then you go into elevator operator. So you learn to operate the elevators. You learn the Ouija board, which is in flight deck control. Flight deck control is pretty much where the handler, who is an officer, he manages pretty much everything from inside. He confirms everything is through our eyes, he confirms everything is safe. Just looking at the Ouija board and the Ouija board.
And to clarify, the Ouija board, that's inside the big superstructure of the ship, and it's a room with lights and, okay.
Yeah, and it's a duplicate of the flight deck, and then they have these little pins that look like aircraft, and they mark as they see, because there's a guy up, or a woman in the tower who's actually relaying where each aircraft's going. And so that's how they keep track of how the Ouija board or the flight deck looks. And so we have you have to go through that stage, and then you go into tractors. And tractors is pretty much you're learning to park aircraft, move aircraft by listening to the director, and the director is the yellow shirt, and that's the final becoming as a director.
And when you say listen to them, so you have like a headset that you're listening to them, or they're yelling things?
No, we're actually signaling.
Okay, using hand-on signals.
Yeah,
okay. So
everything's pretty much almost like sign language. So yeah, we're signaling them what direction to turn and so forth. And so, I mean, the tractors are hooked to the aircraft by these big old tow bars. You know, they weigh anywhere from 150 to 250 pounds. And so with the tow bar and just maneuvering, the tractor drivers learn to become an expert at following directions and driving. So. And then,
here's one of our favorite subjects. My favorite subject is food. So, so what did you like? How were the accommodations for like eating? And then what did you? Was there like a place to eat?
So you have the mess decks down below. I would say it's probably about six or seven flights down below the flight deck, and the food is terrible. I'm just gonna say, like, we would all lose so much weight just because, I mean, we never really had time to go down and even eat. The lines were always too long. Then we pretty much survived just on care packages. And then when you're training to be a director, you're considered a UI. So you still wear the yellow shirt and everything, but you have a UI on your cranial. And the cranial is your head device, what protects you, or it's supposed to protect you, right? When you, if you were ever to have an incident and hit your head. So they would go down to the mess decks and actually bring us whatever they could up. Most of the time it was just a mystery, so you never knew what you were gonna eat, but yeah, the food's terrible.
So when you're on the flight deck, that's a pretty dangerous place, because there's a lot of activity going on, and this uniform you're wearing, you mentioned it's a yellow shirt, but then you have some other gear in addition to the cranial protector that you have. What other kind of gear are you wearing?
Well, you wear flight deck pants, and the flight deck pants, I used to get my own because the ones the ship would give out were just terrible. They're like lightweight material, not too hot, but kind of keeps you warm when it is cold. And then you have your jersey, which is which helps if like we were ever to get into where we had to fight a fire. So it's fire. What's the word? Retardant. Okay. And so we had our jerseys. We had, of course, our float coat. So in case we fly off the ship, we had our floating float coat still. And then we also had our cranial. And our cranial comes with earplugs, so it's supposed to help, with all the loud noise. And then that's pretty much it in your flight deck boots.
So you mentioned it just in case you go overboard. So what would happen if you went overboard like at night in the darkness?
You actually had on your float coat, you had a light that would automatically, it was like a little sensor, so if it hits water, it would automatically start lighting up.
Like a strobe light?
Strobe light kind of thing, yeah.
Wow.
Yeah.
Did you ever know anybody that ever went off?
A pilot, actually. He missed our aircraft. It was two pilots. They were fueling up in the air, and it was night ops, and he didn't have enough fuel, so he needed fuel as an emergency. And so they tried to hook up, and somehow the guy who was fueling him hit him and messed up one of his his engines, and they both went down. So the pilot who we lost was 26 years old, and the other pilot, he was older. He was the one who was fueling. We were able to find him. He only ended up with hypothermia and so forth. But unfortunately, we spent 72 hours and we could not find the other pilot. We think that his injection seat didn't work or something, and he just went down with the aircraft. So, and I mean, that was literally, I want to say, like 3 miles from our ship. And it was like, there were parts of his aircraft flying, or both of their aircrafts flying onto the flight deck. It was a crazy night, but yeah.
And so, kind of out in what general area?
The Gulf area.
Like
so
near the Gulf?
Near Iraq and
Okay.
so forth, yeah.
Okay, so did you went by Diego Garcia and kind of up that way? And
I'm not honestly certain.
Okay, all right.
I'm really not.
But aircraft repair, for those that don't know, I mean, it's like a city at sea. It's had a lot of stuff. So what do you do? Did you ever find out? Could you ever find out a way of knowing what's going on at home, or do you have mail or things like that?
You have you have mail, and then we would have email. I mean, we had nights where we couldn't or days we couldn't email for a certain period of time, depending where we were headed or going. But email was pretty much the best form of communication. Then we could also make phone calls, but it was very delayed. So when you called and you said hi, they wouldn't receive the hi until maybe like 30 seconds or later. So it's very delayed, the phone, if you wanted to call home. So yeah, I'd say email was pretty much the best option.
So you worked a lot of hours on the flight deck in the hangar bay and doing that. And then you had some less than palatable food, and you got like you mentioned, care packages from home that had goodies and stuff in them. And then, so did you have a way of knowing kind of what was going on in the outside world? I mean, was there news?
We had news. It kind of depended where we were at. Again, it was mostly we wouldn't get the news. They would just play movies on the TV, and it would just recycle the same movies over and over. They really didn't want us to know too much of what the news was putting out, and so yeah, that was pretty much it. Just movies, and that's it.
And so, were there other? So on a ship that's got over 4,000 people on it, and then some are male and some are female.
Yes.
And so in your unit, are there all males, or were there some females too? Or?
So I worked on the flight deck. There were actually, in each fly, in my fly, there was, I was the first to get qualified as a director, and then I had a female training. So there was about 2 in each fly, which would bring a total of 6 female yellow shirts out of about, and then there was probably about, I'd say 30 guys.
Okay.
Yeah.
And then, and did you get to sleep in your bed regularly, and did you get to take a shower and that kind of stuff?
So by the time our day ended, which could have been anywhere from 11 to 12, we'd hit our racks. We shower and then hit our racks probably about 1, and get a couple hours in of sleep, and then wake up, dress, get coffee, and head out.
So. And how would you wake up? I mean, did you have an alarm, or somebody come wake you up?
Yeah, I had an alarm. I usually had either use my phone as an alarm, or I had a clock. So I kind of had 2 alarms, and then in case I knew because all of us girls would sleep in the same quarter, or berthing is what they refer it to. And so if I noticed that everyone wasn't awake, then I'd go wake them up, or we were we were a pretty tight group.
Right.
It was a small group, but we all had that same mentality. So yeah, we always had each other's back for the most part.
And then did you have ventilation there? I mean, was it comfortable? Was it hot?
They kept it cold, but when our ACs went out a couple of times, and it was rough.
That's a hot part.
Yeah, I mean, Yeah, it was terrible.
And then what did you do as far as like your uniforms or laundry or that kind of stuff? How to do that?
We had laundry on the ship. Unfortunately, our washer and dryers would break all the time. But I would say there was probably about 15 washers and 15 dryers for the whole ship. So sometimes we'd pay someone to do our laundry just because we didn't have time. So for a full bag, they would only charge us like $5, and they'd go do our laundry. But it was so for those guys who had that extra time, they'd go do that for us.
Right. And then did you end up knowing anybody like from boot camp or down in school in Florida? And then when you got on the ship, was there anybody that you ever knew that like knew from before? Or
And nobody. No.
And how about from boot camp and then in school? Did any of those people go on the ship as well?
No, none.
So you're by yourself on that. Okay.
Yeah, I met and formed relationships with everybody. So.
And then when you were aboard the ship and you were on that for several years, so what was your rank then at that point?
So I went from an E3 to an E4.
Okay.
So yeah.
And so what was the name of your type, your rate?
It was I was third class petty officer. Yeah.
So that's like a non-commissioned officer, petty officer.
Yeah.
So were you in charge of others?
Yeah. When I went through tractors, that phase, I was considered the tractor king, which is pretty much the supervisor of all those who were in tractors. And then once I got to my director position up on Fly One, I was also pretty much in charge of all of our blue shirts. And so, yeah, I mean, at the end of it all, I was probably, when you become a yellow shirt, you're pretty much in charge of everyone's safety on the flight deck. Because honestly, there's a lot of people who come up and aren't familiar, and they just want to see it, flight operations, and they want to, be right there, but they're not paying attention. So we're always vigilant of other people, especially when we see people we've never seen and their uniform spotless, and you're just like, no.
And did you ever hear from anybody that you went to school with, like at chapter or out of CSUB, that ever said, "Hey, I hear you're in the service," or anything like that? Did you ever hear, or they even know you're in the service?
Yeah, I mean, everyone found out. One of my good friends, we're still good friends. She would email me every now and then, but yeah, it's kind of like everyone lives their own life. So
yeah, and so and then you were on the ship over there in the Gulf area, and then you spent a deployment over there, and then you came back to San Diego, and then did you go out again?
We did. So after the 2011 to 12, we went out for in 2014 to 15 for 10 months. So instead of 6, we ended up going for 10, and that was rough.
And does that there's a term for that? The type of cruise you go on, is it like a
Westpac?
Okay.
Yeah.
And then did you go to other ports?
So we pretty much kept it pretty consistent. We went to Dubai. I've been to Dubai probably like 7 times. I've been to Hong Kong once, Perth, Australia twice, Chennai, India once, Singapore once. So yeah, that was pretty much it. Bahrain, went there once. But got to see a little bit of everything.
Was it like a tour you could take, or you go buy
So
stuff?
yeah, usually when we hit a port, it would be anywhere from 3 to 6 days. So they would offer tours, and you could take a tour, or you could just go and kind of like get lost for a little while. And they would tell you the places you're restricted to go. We have to do a safety stand down before we're all released. But at the same time, everyone has a duty day, because you can't leave the ship just abandoned. So we'd be divided into 4 sections, and just depending on what section you were and what day it landed, that was your duty day, where you had to spend 24 hours on the ship, and then after that you could be released to go.
And do they have names for those duty?
Just pretty much do section 1, 2, 3, yeah.
Right. And then, so then now that's 2 times that you mentioned you're going out. So then you came back to San Diego again.
Yes.
And then did you go out and were you on other deployments?
No, because I got out in July of 2015.
Okay.
Yeah.
And then, so you mentioned the time that, a couple aircraft collided and you guys were looking for those. So were there other times that really, it was kind of scary?
Yeah. Actually, my first time on the flight deck, I almost got blown off the ship. I was over back aft. At the time, I was blue shirting in Fly 3, which is the aft of the ship. And we had prowlers, and which these prowlers, they're loud, they're big, and so I had to go underneath, and the way I went underneath wasn't the way you have to go underneath these aircrafts, these prowlers, a certain way, unlike the F-18s or any other type of aircraft. And so what happened was the exhaust just got me, and I was on elevator 4, which is the port side of the ship, which would be like the left side of the ship, and it just blew me. I mean, I was in the net, half of my body was hanging, and I was just looking at the ocean, and I was all banged up. My cranial flew off, and all I could hear is I had one guy grabbing me, and then they made like a chain until they could bring me up. That was probably one of the most traumatic experiences I had.
Did you get hooked up in that netting around the outside?
So it was hooked up to just my belt, like my buckle, so my buckle was literally what saved me.
From just going.
Yeah, because my whole even float coat was already coming off of me, it was just up.
And that's from that jet
cranium.
blast from that EHMP prowler.
Yeah.
So then you come back into port in San Diego after that time, and then from there till the time you got out was a certain period of time, and then you're like, hey, I think I'm not staying in. I'm going to go ahead and get out.
Yeah. So I got out. I met a good friend of mine who she's a work study at the Veteran Center, Myra Ornelas, and so me and her became friends, and she informed me of all the different benefits I qualified for and things like that, because when you get out, they send you to this TAPS class, but they don't really teach you a lot about, especially with the county or the area you're going to live at, what's going to be offered there for you. So that's how I got to know the Vet Center, the VSO, Wounded Heroes Fund, and all these different, benefits that I could receive. And so right away I began school and got my bachelor's in criminal justice, and then now...
And that was back in Bakersfield?
This is back in Bakersfield in about August 2015. And then I began a work study at the Bakersfield Veteran Center, and I really enjoyed the interaction with veterans and just, hearing different stories and of different eras. And then I got offered a position over with Wounded Heroes Fund to do a female veteran outreach. And so I started a program where I'd get together bring some female veterans out to do different activities just to kind of socialize and things like that. And so that's pretty much where I'm at now.
And for those that are listening that don't know, you and I know, but expand on what a VSO is, or what the VSO stands for.
Yeah, the Veteran Service Office.
Right, okay.
So, yes.
And some people don't know that. And, so now you're back here in Bakersfield, and then you found out about some of your benefits, your education benefits, and so looking back through some of your experiences, so how was the reception when you came back by your family and the community when you got out of the Navy?
I would say pretty supportive, actually. I got a lot of, it's been a hard, I would say, adjustment as far as just finding understanding of why people complain about certain things when it's not a big deal, or just getting that, going from such a stressful environment to where, and I mean, for the most part, you have a lot of structure in the military to where you kind of have to build that and make that structure yourself.
So talk about that a little bit, about the readjustment from military to civilian.
I would say it's tough because I've noticed I've come from a close family, and it just feels like I don't even know how to relate with some of them, a lot of them anymore. I don't feel as close to my family as I used to, which is unfortunate, but we kind of grow and everyone changes. And then I would just having building that structure again, where I kind of now I have to push myself instead. There was always when I was in there was always that mission, and you just had that motivation because you're serving your country. It's the biggest thing you could do, and to where you're like going to school and and you're still not sure what you want to do with your life. That's been probably the hardest thing is trying to find that I don't know, I guess that feeling of self-worth.
And probably some of it is, how did you feel like, how were you received by some of your fellow classmates, like when you were going to school? Did they understand what you did, or were they supportive?
So for the most part, my class has a lot of veterans, so the interaction's pretty good. The teamwork's really good, so there hasn't really been ever a problem. I've probably met a few classmates that I've kept in touch with, but for the most part, everyone especially there's a lot of veterans there, so they had a pretty good understanding.
Good. And then, so your experiences in the Navy, a couple of things. Expand a little bit on how your time that you served in the Navy, how that affected your life, and also life lessons that you learned. What Jessica Brown learned life lessons as a result of your Navy service.
I would say I realized that there's more in me than I thought. I accomplished a big thing in life, and the Navy is one of my greatest accomplishments by far. I've learned that I have a lot to give and a lot to offer, especially in Kern County. There's just so much out there for veterans, and I just love being a part of that, and being able to reach out and maybe help a person who's going through a hard time, maybe find an easier way to adjust. So I guess the biggest thing, I just got out of being really grateful for the little things, and having a better understanding of other branches of the military too, because when you've never experienced the military, you don't realize what the day-to-day operations consist of, and every branch is different. And because now that I work with different veterans from different branches, I get to hear their stories, and I get to and it's just a good feeling, that I have that ability to in that drive to help others, especially veterans.
You're very passionate about it. So anything I missed that you want to say, make sure it gets said, or later on anything I wish I'd have said this?
So. No, I pretty much broke it down.
Well, Jessica, I want you to know on behalf of all of us here, we're very grateful for your honorable service.
Thank you.
And we're fortunate that we live in a community that honors our veterans.
Yes. And
that you are a shining example of what is right with our nation, and the type of selfless service and service above self, and want to help others. And it shows because you're enthusiastic about what you do, and you can't really, that's something that's genuine.
Yeah.
And so, but anyway, we want to thank you for your service.
Thank you.
And for the honor that you bring to our community as well.
Thank you.
All right. Thank you.
Thank you.
Very much.
Thank you.